Welcome back. It's Lit Book Reviews here
Do I look
again.
like I'm 5'5"? Do I look short right now?
You look like a short king, bro.
Dude, this chair's really tall.
For those watching on video, things may look different. Loach and I are now separated by state lines. It's a tragedy. I'm still down in Atlanta, and Loach is in. Can I say? Is it a secret?
Dude, it's a secret. I don't want people coming for my life.
Loach is in Nashville. If you're trying to kill him. Whoa. All right. So, as always, I'm here, and I am Zendaya, and with me, as always, is Willem Dafoe, and we're happy to introduce another episode of It's Lit Book Reviews. Bro, the Green Goblin.
What made you normally there's like a line that connects them. What's the line that made you think of
they are technically
say Timothy.
They are technically connected via the Spider-Man movie, where all the Spider-Mans come in there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But Zendaya just popped in my head, and then Willem Dafoe.
Is she still dating Tom Holland?
I think so. I don't know. I don't really keep up with that kind of thing. All right, we're back. So
we are back.
Yeah, we're doing things a little differently.
We're back and we're famous, dude.
Yeah, we do have more subscribers now than we did last time.
I mean, honestly, I think last time we had 33 subscribers.
Yeah, now we're at like 200 something. I'm pretty sure they're all bots, but hey, we'll take it.
Dude, they're all from China, and we love China, by the way. Shout out to everybody watching from China. Shout out.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, I should have gotten balloons, dude.
Oh, yeah.
I thought about it.
You wanted to get some balloons to celebrate?
I mean, I just wanted to remember this moment for forever, honestly.
Well, you do have a
bad
memory.
I almost bought you another copy of that Rick Atkinson book that I guess is his newest one. There's another one at that Books Million I went to today for $12.
Well, I'm glad you didn't, because I have a copy.
When did you get it?
I've had it for a little while now.
Yeah, since 2019. When it came out?
No, I've only had it.
All right, so what are we talking about, man? I feel like I'm stalling.
All right, let's get into it then. We're going to start out with Friedrich Nietzsche. So I read Beyond Good and Evil. If you don't know, Nietzsche was a philosopher, one of the most popular philosophers, to my knowledge. I have not read a lot of philosophy at all, so I don't even really know what I read. I got a few tidbits out of it, but honestly, a lot of it seemed kind of stupid to me and kind of arrogant.
Is it old?
It's a great question. I mean, it's definitely old. Let me see. But yeah, so this is my first actual reading into a full-time legit philosophy book, and it was all right. It wasn't anything that I would really recommend to anybody ever. But it was released in 1886. So kind of starting with that, I mean, obviously,
dang,
a lot of it, I guess, may have been pretty profound at the time. I think the realm of philosophy that this book falls under is existentialism, which, I mean, who knows what that means? I don't know. So
I'm going to Google it while you're doing that.
There were some moments where I was like, okay, yeah, that is cool. That's interesting. Or that makes sense. But a lot of it was just kind of either yeah, no crap, bro. Or it was, just really arrogant sounding to me.
So for the viewer, and I didn't know this either, it's a form of philosophy that explores the issue of human existence.
There you go. So, that makes sense, I guess, from what I read. I did Audible most of this. I read some of it and then Audibled a good bit of it. And there definitely were a few moments where I kind of zoned out, but I highly doubt I missed anything important.
How long was this book?
This is a 230-page book. So, I mean, it's not long. It was I had it sped up a little bit, and it was a 6-hour listen, I think. So, yeah, to kind of first start with Nietzsche, I don't really know that much about him. I'm not going to act like I do. But from what I read, just kind of revolving around this book in particular, it was pretty controversial in that I think he was European. I don't know if he was actually German, but he had a lot to say about Nazism. He was
European.
Well, he's definitely European. I just can't remember if he was actually German or not. But
yeah,
either way, there was a lot of controversy around his takes on Jews and
God.
things that might have. He had some anti-Semitic takes, but then he had other moments where he like praised them specifically. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to actually gauge, but the whole point of me saying this is that when he died, which was not long after this was written, to my knowledge, his sister, I believe it was, like kind of doctored some of his works and made them seem more like pro-Nazi than he actually was, according to what I've read. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that still think, yeah, okay. So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that still think he did have like Nazi-leaning tendencies or whatever. But
he died in 1900. So I mean,
yeah, he died way before the rise of Nazism. The whole idea is that he had ideas that propagated Nazism, because Hitler apparently loved Nietzsche and his work. But obviously, like I said, I don't know when that doctoring from his sister took place, if it was pre or post Hitler or during or what. But that's kind of the idea, is that there were a lot of people in the Nazi regime. It may not have been him. I think it was actually Goebbels.
Yusuf Goebbels.
Yeah, not Hitler himself. Hitler may have. It may have been both of them, honestly. I don't know. But there were some moments where I would hear things or read things in the book where I was like, okay, yeah, I can see how that's a little like elitist. Like, especially when you talk about like the Ubermensch, like that whole idea came from him, like the
What's
Superman.
That? I don't know anything about that.
I got a couple notes on it. Basically, the idea is a person who transcends conventional morality and societal norms. So the Ubermensch creates their own values and lives authentically, free from societal constraints. Yeah, but in a very philosophical way, and like from the standpoint of him thinking that like his whole idea about good and evil and morality is very confusing, and like
is this like just a top G? Is he describing an Andrew Tate top G?
Yeah, essentially. I'm sure Andrew Tate sees himself as an Ubermensch, yes. But he starts the book talking about like dogmatism and how like antiquated and wrong it is. And essentially he's just saying anything that's absolute is wrong. And then he goes on further later in the book about like religion. Like he doesn't like Christianity at all. But he does go after a couple other religions, but particularly Christianity he thinks is like super wrong or whatever.
So this guy's in hell.
He busted them gates wide open, brother. Who knows? But he just had a lot of ideas that, especially nowadays, I could see how they could be taken in a very wrong way. And who knows, they might have been meant in a wrong way. Dude, somebody's laundry done?
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a couple of notes here that I'll kind of go over. But Nietzsche, again, he's one of the most popular philosophers, like as it stands today, one of the most well-known and remembered philosophers of modern times. Or modern history. And again, there was controversy around a lot of what he said, but I looked up a couple articles when I got done, and a lot of people said that this stuff, like if you actually read it for like his original writings that aren't doctored, and you learn more about him and read his other stuff, he was definitely a weird guy and had some strange ideas, but he wasn't like some outright, pre-Nazi Nazi.
All I know is I Googled him, and like it shows his other works, and he has a book called The Gay Science.
Really?
Yeah, published in 1882.
Wow. I wonder if that meant like does that mean homosexual, or does that mean like happy?
I don't know.
I don't either. But so a couple of ideas just from Nietzsche. I won't talk about it long, but a couple of things are, he's got a critique of traditional morality where he just argues that they're rooted in Christian European moral traditions, and that like these values will suppress individual creativity and hinder the development of a higher form of human existence.
So Christianity's hindering that in his mind?
Well, morality in bigger scope in general. Like he thinks he's got a whole problem with morality, it seems. It's very strange.
He's not a big right and wrong guy.
No.
He is that there is no right or wrong.
I mean, and it's in the title. It's beyond good and evil. Like he thinks that calling things good versus evil and like truth versus lie, black and white, like that kind of thing is like antiquated. And that as humans, we have the potential to be of a higher, like on a higher plane than just looking at things as black and white, good and evil, and that kind of thing. So like, and to dive into that further, one thing that he's known for is the master slave mentality, where he contrasts the values of those in positions of power, the masters, with those who are oppressed, the slaves. And he suggests that traditional morality has its origins in the value of the oppressed. Which is interesting because he basically in one part of the book is talking about how like all societies come from, he uses the word barbarians and savages, but he's talking about like, Europeans when they came to the Americas and that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
talks about how the barbarians always end up being like the noble class, and then everybody under that is considered like, the slaves, as he calls them here, because he's not actually talking about like human slavery necessarily. He's more just talking about hierarchy and that type of thing. And he talks about how traditional morality comes from the like that class of people, which is usually the larger group of people, obviously. But he's talking about how it comes from a place of being the oppressed, which I thought was interesting. It's kind of his argument to say that like all the ideas of morality come out of a place of oppression. So if you're living in a place of like having this moral code, then you are living essentially in a cage, like you're boxing yourself in, which again, it's like Thanos talk, dude. It's just his justification for, it sounds like the preemptory to justifying genocide a lot of the time. So it's pretty wild. He talks about the will to power as a driving force in humans, which just refers to a desire for self-expression, self-overcoming, and the pursuit of individual excellence. So a lot of this is just very like, to me, it came off as just like very self-centered, and not really like basically like turning a cold shoulder to the rest of the world and anybody else that might matter, and just worrying about yourself and finding yourself kind of thing. Which again, this came out in the late 1800s.
Did he get married and like have kids, bro? Because it sounds like he never had to make a decision that didn't involve himself.
I mean, you're not wrong. I don't know. I don't know if he had a wife or kids. Probably not. If I had to guess, he seems like a terrible person.
So, but he's just saying that if you have a moral code, it's because you're being oppressed.
Not necessarily. He's saying that morality comes from a place of oppression, and therefore, if you're living in a place of like these moral codes, black and white, good and evil, then you're not able to reach your full potential because you're living in a place that essentially makes you oppressed, even if you're doing it to yourself. Which again, it's like, where does this stop? Like, what do you mean necessarily?
So where's the place you can go where this doesn't exist?
Yeah, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just very like ethereal. I don't know if that's the right word, but it doesn't. None of it feels super tangible to me. Like a lot of the stuff he had to say, it just feels like like it made sense to me. Like even though I read articles before and after about like him and like things around this book, and had the idea in my head that, oh, okay, some people have tried to twist this to sound more like pro-Nazi or pro-elitist and anti-Semitic. But then I listen to it and read it, and I'm like, it kind of does sound like that. Like you could definitely take it that way. I could see other interpretations, but I could see how it easily became that, especially for someone like that already leans that way.
I feel like it's such a circle though. So if you're saying that a moral code comes from a society where there's oppression, I mean, name a society that doesn't have like a moral code of like, okay, you do this, you go to jail, or like you are killed. Like, I mean,
which is
we're
again
not even talking about like, is this right or wrong? Like on a whatever. It's just like you just can't do that. So does he saying that doesn't count? Like as far as laws, that those aren't.
He doesn't talk much about law or government. He doesn't say a lot about politics or anything like that. So it seems like it's very, like it's meant to be taken in a very individual way, like in your own mind. Like I don't think he's necessarily saying you can just murder people if that's what you think is going to help you reach your highest version of yourself. But because he doesn't expand on some of those ideas, it's hard to interpret.
I'm stronger than you, so like your stuff, I'm like a better like owner of your stuff because I'm stronger than you, so like that's like my moral, or not moral code, but like he'd be game for that.
Probably.
Or just taking from the
I would imagine,
because they can't protect their stuff, so they don't deserve to have it type of mentality.
I don't know if I really can't speak to like what this book represents totally, because again, it was confusing at times. A lot of it seemed silly to me. But then there's stuff in there where you get some of these ideas, but it seems so vague. And I'll just say this too, philosophy in general, man, like half the time I'm hearing about it or reading it, I'm either going, oh yeah, no duh, we shouldn't, have sex with animals. Good take, Aristotle. It's like, it either feels really elementary in that regard, or I'm just reading it. A lot of what I was reading in this book, I was just like, bro, you're not saying anything. You're just
Yeah.
jumbling a bunch of words together and making it sound really deep and smart, but you're not saying anything. And maybe I'm dumb. Maybe a lot of people who are into philosophy would be like, no, dude, you totally missed it. It went way over your head. I'm sure that's true to a degree, because even he makes comments in this book about, there's one part, dude, where he explains this whole thing and then says, now, if you didn't understand, basically paraphrasing, he says, now, if you didn't understand that, for the people who are of lower intellect, I'm going to explain it this way. He literally says that in one point in the book. And guess what, dude? I understood what he was saying way better after that when he did that explanation. So I was like, okay, maybe this book's not for me, but
you're just not elitist enough, dude.
I mean, clearly. So anyway, that's kind of the gist of some of the notes I have. I have a couple other things, but they're not important. A big one is definitely critique of religion. Like, he just has a lot to say about Christianity specifically. He doesn't like it. And then I do have a couple of quotes that I made notes of that I did think were all right. I'm going to read a couple of them. So the first one is, he who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. And if thou gaze long into an abyss, the abyss will also gaze into thee. So that sounds like something we've all heard some version of that before, but that was him. Pretty good quote. Another one, to talk much about oneself may also be a means of concealing oneself, which I thought was cool. Like, he was essentially saying, like, a person who talks a lot and gasses themselves up may be true, may not be true what they're saying, but they may just be saying all that stuff to keep you from finding out something else or keep you from another area of their life. Objection, evasion, joys, distrust, and love of irony are signs of health. Everything absolute belongs to pathology. So that's kind of the whole dogmatism diatribe he goes on there. Love brings to light the noble and hidden qualities of a lover, his rare and exceptional traits. It is thus liable to be deceptive as to his normal character, which my understanding from that was essentially like, and maybe not just in like a love relationship between a man and a woman or whatever, but in any situation where you're showing like your best traits, it can, and I feel like this is most applicable to like the beginning of a relationship where you're giving someone the best version of yourself. Then after like the first few months or so or whatever, like,
oh yeah,
you start to get to know them better, quote unquote, and that kind of thing. And things might change a little bit sometimes. So yeah. I felt like that was a pretty obvious takeaway from that. It seems that in order to inscribe themselves upon the heart of humanity with everlasting claims, all great things have first to wander about the earth as enormous and awe-inspiring caricatures, which I thought was pretty interesting. He's basically saying that like a lot of the people that we look up to, and he had a lot to say again about Christianity, but also a lot of philosophers before his time. Like, he basically calls them stupid over and over. And so I think he's just kind of making a comment that he thinks a lot of the people that humanity in general and societies looked up to as like their moral betters, or just caricatures of like, you know, themselves. Tell me what you think this one means. The belly is the reason why man does not so readily take himself for a god. What do you think that means?
I guess that because we're hungry, we're weak. I don't know. I mean, like,
that's what I thought at first, but I was like, well, maybe it's like, you know, people say like a gut feeling and that kind of thing. I don't know. I didn't know if it was supposed to be more literal or like kind of that take. But okay, like, this is actually one of my favorites.
Makes us not gods.
I don't know. I think he doesn't believe in God, so I don't even know why he says that. But this is one of my favorites from the book. Insanity in individuals is something rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, just, and pretty applicable to our time, just like groupthink and echo chambers, and like people just getting all these crazy ideas about the world they live in. So that one I liked. Insanity in individuals is something rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. Just a couple more here. Not only our reason, but also our conscience truckles to our strongest impulse, the tyrant in us. So again, I think he's kind of just referring back to like, you know, there being this thing in us that wants to achieve like the highest version of ourselves and like self-expression and self-identification, which, you know, I'm kind of torn on this whole idea because part of me gets it. Like, I do think people should love themselves and know themselves and like take care of themselves. But there is a line where you go into like narcissism and selfishness where you're like not useful to society or your family and friends, and you become kind of a dud of a person. So I think there's a fine line that he doesn't really visit much, which is where some of this stuff can be taken the wrong way, in my opinion. But then the last one is, poets act shamelessly towards their experiences. They exploit them. And I just thought that was kind of interesting about like art in general, like songwriters, anything like that. Like you're exploiting your own personal experiences to like, you know, have some gain. I don't know if that's really what he meant by it necessarily, but that's kind of what I took from it. So look, overall, I'm not a big philosophy guy. I may have completely misinterpreted and misunderstood this entire book. If there's any philosophy, buffs out there that see or hear this, let me know what I'm missing or some other works that I may enjoy. But I don't usually read for this kind of thing anyway, so that's probably part of why I didn't super enjoy it. But it was cool. I kind of just wanted to expose myself. I'm trying to expose myself to more like well-known things that you hear of all the time. So like I don't just take sound bites.
Before.
Yeah, exactly. So like I don't want to just have sound bites that I've heard from other people or in movies about like what works are and what they represent. Like I'd like to have some experience. So I thought of Nietzsche and thought I'll just grab this Beyond Good and Evil and see what's up. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 overall in my 5-star rating on Goodreads. Mostly because obviously the writing was really good. Like there were parts where I'd be like, okay, like he's onto something here. And it wasn't hard to get through. Like a lot of it is broken up into like just a couple of sentences. So you get an idea from that. But it definitely didn't get 4 or 5 because I disagreed with a lot of what I felt like he was saying. Again, he came off as very arrogant and like, he definitely thinks that he's an intellectual above anybody else in his life. So more of a mark on what I interpreted as his character maybe than the book itself. But anyway, that's really all I have for Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. Got any questions, man? You got any philosophy questions you want to ask me? I'm a pro now.
Bro. Dude, I feel like philosophy is one of those things that's like it's cool to talk about like in the moment, and then it's like then you like go to work the next day and you're like, sure, bro. Like it's something to think about like when you have free time,
Yeah.
It's like when I'm doing my 9 to 5, which I guess, people who come up with philosophies also are not working 9 to 5s,
Yeah.
They're people who are in a, like, I mean, I just don't know of many philosophers, and maybe I also don't know anything about philosophers. I'm not claiming that, but I just feel like most of them are not poor. So, they're academics.
Yeah. And I think there's an argument to be said for like most philosophy that we know of comes out of times when there is a class system, and usually the people that are those philosophers are very high up in that class system. So it does seem kind of like, and then people like him are not only from that higher caste in the system, but they're basically taking a shit on like a lot of the beliefs and the ideas and the moralities of good normal people, and just saying that the reason, essentially implying that the reason these people are where they're at is because they're not just saying screw it to morality. It's like things like that. It just kind of rubs you the wrong way, but I think a lot of philosophy can be that way.
That scared me so bad.
But that's it for Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil for me.
Good old Nietzsche.